Okay, so just a quick question came up over the break about the Roth versus traditional. Let me see if I can zoom that a bit for you. So anyway, the age limit, not a big factor. You know, under age 70 and a half, that's not going to impact most of us. I think we're all in that category. Income limits, pretty similar. The big thing about a Roth IRA and the traditional has to do with when you get taxed, just as we said. Deadlines are the same. You can April 15th. So again, this is one of those few exceptions where you can actually do things to change the amounts on your taxes after the first of the year. So when you're doing your taxes this year and you go, oh, I haven't done my IRA yet, you still have a chance up until you file your taxes. Withdrawal rules. So that's really the key difference on here. So Roth IRA, you'll never pay taxes on the withdrawals. Why? Because you didn't have any special tax treatment when you put the money in there. You paid taxes. That was after tax income. You made your $100,000 and you paid your full taxes on it, and you got whatever 70 grand left. Out of that 70 grand, you bought your Roth with that, your Roth IRA. On a 401k or a traditional IRA, you use your pre-tax money. You get paid $100,000. You use maybe $20,000, or for this part, for a Roth, you're just going to go like $5,500, whatever their limits are, their max limits are, but still pre-tax money, and you're going to put it on there. But since in the traditional IRA, you have not paid taxes on it, you are going to pay ordinary income tax on the withdrawals of the traditional IRA when you're in retirement. Now, that is the reason for using this tax deferred status is to, with the presumption that your income is going to be quite a bit lower in your retirement years. If you're going to continue to work, say you're like a college professor and you can continue to do this gig till you're in your 70s, probably not a huge advantage to you. But the expectation is most people kind of do their peak in your earning years when they're, just prior to retirement, 50 to 60 or 5 or something, and they're kind of getting clobbered in taxes at that point. So anything they can do to minimize that tax and then defer it till they get into retirement time. Penalties for withdrawals are slightly different. And again, we'll spend more time on this when we get into the retirement savings, but I just want to kind of step on that. Again, you got to be careful on what sites you go to, but Vanguard, like I say, Fidelity, there's other companies out there that have both products. They'll sell you either one, so they aren't giving you biased advice. So you can go with that information with some confidence. All right, let's jump back into here on the. So we talked about home equity loans, why that's a smart way if you're looking at taking credit, and you have the option of getting a home equity loan. That's probably going to be some of your cheaper credit. So next one, your credit capacity, building your credit rating. Now, just actually building your credit rating when you have nothing, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I know people who will go out and take loans just to pay them back to build their credit rating. I'm not that, I just kind of waited for my credit rating to sort of build up and went with it from there. I didn't want to get myself into trouble. I mean, what you need a credit rating for is to typically, be approved for a loan, and I wasn't all that anxious to jump into a loan. I also was in a unique situation. Some of you may be in there, but in terms of being a veteran, where getting the loan approved was a bit easier. But anyway, most people, I think, have access to as much credit as they need, perhaps more. Now, there are advantages to being a fairly decent credit risk. Number one, to get the credit card to get for all the reasons I mentioned before. And then also when you go to a bank, depending on your credit worthiness, the people with the better credit are going to get typically a better rate in terms of the loan percentages. So, but I don't take that many loans where that's really a factor. There's credit ratings and all that are kind of a screwy concept. I mean, you could go out looking at cars today and go and talk to different people, and every time they kind of run your credit, you can see your credit score maneuver around. Because if you sign up or look into a loan, that will start to bring down your credit score. So you want to be careful on how you proceed on some of those situations. Can you afford the loan in order to make the payment? Are you prepared to make this trade-off? I mean, this is all good stuff, but really the test for most people, especially when it's a brand new car, I gladly pay that. I'll gladly give up this or that. You will for a new car, but if it's a 6-year loan, do you want to do that for a 6-year-old car when now you're having to pay for repairs and everything else in addition to this new car, and it's not such a new car anymore? So anyway, necessary evil, but if big picture advice is buy a house and get by with the car you can. Cars are a depreciating asset. You're not never going to make money. Yes.
What kind of stuff exactly shows up on you? What affects your credit score besides credit payments on a credit card?
Yeah, lates, things like that. We'll talk more about it because I think there's a number of factors. Certainly, if you have late payments, if you have your debts are maybe out of proportion to your income, collections. If you've got into collection, then you're going to have a subterranean score at that point. I mean, late payments are bad, but if it actually makes its way to collections, you need to intervene. Especially if it's, don't just let it go. Most of the time, well, it's a very good practice, obviously, to pay your bills on time. And if you do have a problem like a one-off where, dog ate it, whatever, it didn't get to the bank on time, call them and just say, this is what happened. And if it's, if it looks like a one-off event, usually they will give you that, whatever the fee is, $25 or whatever, and they'll also kind of erase that history. A lot of times the merchant may kind of have a sort of a bad boy list for you internally, but they may not report it to the credit reporting agencies. Once they start reporting it to credit reporting agencies, you're going to have problems. So, but there's a myriad of factors that go into it. I mean, but you do have 3 different organizations. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but part of it comes in as credit capacity.
And younger people, you see a lot, like you go to the doctor or something, because the doctors are newer, paying outside what insurance covers, and you go to the dentist and the bill's a little bit over what the insurance cover. A lot of young people don't pay that bill and just forget about it, and the doctor will send it to collections after trying to get it from you for a while. Yeah. And so you see a lot of that kind of stuff in the home credit.
Collection agency people are merciless, yeah, and we'll talk more about them, but you don't. Again, another list of group of people you never hopefully want to meet. If say you owe $5,000 to a dentist, they'll turn that over to a collection agency, or they'll even sell that, in the things. But for $5,000 debt, how much will they get for that?
It depends on the company that they're dealing with. Like Cornerstone will pay a percentage of it.
Yeah.
And go after you for the full month.
Exactly. So this dentist, he's already got a losing situation. He's in kind of loss mitigation. He'll sell off that bad debt, let's say for $500, a $5,000 debt. Now you got this collection agency that is holding the title to that debt. They have legal recourse to come after you for the whole $5,000. Will they be able to get it? Maybe, maybe not. But they're going to be pretty aggressive because they're incentivized. They've got claim to it. It's like dog the bounty hunter stuff, It's pretty rough. So, anyway, credit capacity though, debt to income ratio. should not exceed 20% of your net income, not including house payments, long-term liability. Anyway, there's so many variables. It's hard to have any kind of nationwide standards. Anybody like who lives, say, in San Francisco or something, their housing costs are going to be so out of proportion that it's not a good comparison nationwide. But anyway, they're going to use the formula and they're going to look at how much you've got. Obviously, less than one. Total liabilities, net worth. You should be worth more than you owe. That's a good rule of thumb. You don't always get there, at least not early on, but and that's going to affect your credit score. So this is where we get into co-signing a loan. What you do now, and you guys may be in this sort of situation, and then maybe later in life you'll be approached by somebody to co-sign a loan for them, and just as a rule of thumb, don't do it. What's going to happen, let's say in a typical co-signing situation, usually the reason why the person needs to have a co-signer is because they don't have the ability to pay. They don't have enough assets to pay, so they're not in a great situation. And then they come to you as a co-signer. Well, most of that mail for that whatever loan they're taking out is not going to be going to the co-signer. It's going to be going to that original person, right? So that original person is getting these bills, and now you're kind of responsible for them. Anyway, let's just say they blow off all these bills. Now the thing goes into collection. Who do they come after? If I'm, again, Dog the Bounty Hunter, am I going to go waste the time with a guy who didn't have a great credit score and couldn't really pay for this thing? I'm going to go after the person who co-signed it because he's fully responsible because he co-signed on it, and that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. I'm not even going to worry about the original person because he's already demonstrated that he doesn't do a good job paying his bills. I'm going to come after you. So if that's the situation, if it's my child or something, and they want to co-sign a loan, I would rather loan the kid the money. Keep me off the loan. Put down a bigger down payment. Do something, but don't think that you've got, because it's a co-signer, it's the shared responsibility. If they default, it's all you. I mean, that's not the sharing agreement you want to be in. So anyway, you're being asked to guarantee a loan for somebody who can't afford it. If they don't pay the full amount, plus any collection fees, all that time they blew it off, the situation kind of got worse. And then, they don't have to go back. And you can't say, well, it's really his. I was only... They're just wasting their time. I mean, they've got legal title to you because you signed it, so that's what's going to happen. If you do co-sign, consider, can you pay the loan? Your credit rating could be damaged because you're on the hook for that. You may not be able to get your own loans. Co-signer rights, which are probably going to be pretty limited, especially in Alaska, and request a copy or overdue payment notice. But by this point, it's a little late in the game. It's just better to in most cases to avoid it. Now, one thing I've always been curious about was if you co-sign a loan with somebody, that person with the lesser credit, the fact that they're listed on that loan, do they get any benefit on the credit reporting bureaus? I don't think so. Yeah, still. So maybe that would be the justification for maybe a small loan or something. But you may be in a point in the not too distant future where you want a credit card, and there's reasonable reasons to have a credit card other than going out and blowing money. You just want to be able to rent cars and pay for airline tickets and do stuff like that. So my daughter's, she's on my Alaska card, but I haven't seen her credit score, but I don't think there's a whole lot of data on it. But she's got a card in her name, but it's my account. So we'll see. I'll know more on that in the near future. Building and maintaining a credit rating. So, yep. All the good stuff, but check to see what's in your credit report. And really, it's painless. We could do it online right now. I've done it before in class. I probably won't do it tonight, but anyway, you basically type in your information. You go to one of those websites, and like I said, we're going to pull up. I think I still got that saved in the thing, but the internet in here is too slow. But pull it up, and what it will do is it'll give you your credit report, and it'll show, lates. It'll show, obviously, it'll show collection type stuff, but it will show. It's just kind of a good roster of you come across, oh yeah, I've got an Old Navy card or something. I completely forgot about that. If you don't know where the card is, you need to get that canceled, and you can certainly see if there's other problems. So the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So they're three distinct entities, but they come up with about the same score. They're using roughly the same information. Have you noticed difference between the different bureaus? They're pretty uniform.
They're just, some of them are a little bit more difficult to understand or read than others.
Yeah.
TransUnion's not really-
But when you go to pull a credit report, now say you're buying a house or something like that, there'll be a fee in there where, okay, you've got to get your credit report, and they aren't going to give you one for that case. You're going to have to buy it. I think they're $50, $75, something like that. It's a fee for service, but you're buying a house, so compared to the mammoth purchase price of the house, not a big deal. But that's how they make their money. But anyway, in terms of what's on your credit report, banks, finance companies, credit cards, merchants, other creditors, all sorts of people, they share information. They want to know who's good and bad. Now, obviously, you saw, the astronomical number of complaints. There's quite a bit of consumer protection that's involved in this. But the problem is it's great to have that protection out there, but to actually follow up sometimes, getting some of those bureaucracies to move and act on your behalf is tougher to do. But if they are doing some fraudulent action, the penalties are pretty severe to the lenders. Anyway, adverse data can be reported for 7 years, bankruptcy for 10 years. But let's say you have a bankruptcy and it can only be on your record for 10 years, which is a long time. But even after that point, they're going to look at your credit report and they're going to see this big void where there's no data being reported. You don't have to be too smart to realize this guy probably had a bankruptcy because there's a huge gap in there. So it could affect anyway. Bankruptcy is not something you want to do. If you're denied credit, that would be certainly a time, if you haven't reviewed your credit report lately, to get in there and see what the problem is. And you may see some erroneous stuff in there, and you need to get that fixed. So that's not a bad thing. The creditor needs to respond. They have to tell you, and you can take steps. But if it's a legitimate thing, you're kind of stuck. You can put in a 100-word explanation, but most of the time, unless it's something, at that point, I think you kind of lost cause. They're looking at a credit score. They don't have time to read a whole bunch of text. So, in terms of credit scores, character, you pay them on time. Do you have the capacity? How much you're worth? And then the collateral. A secured loan, something where they have something tangible to go after is going to have a better interest rate. They're going to loan you more against it. And then conditions. What are things going on, in the world? For a while there, they were loaning to anybody. Then, especially in the mortgage business, they tightened up extremely after the last fall. So how to improve the credit score? Make sure it's accurate, pay your bills, understand how it's done, legal steps, credit report scans. So again, like I say, they have to give you a free credit report once every 12 months, right? But there's 3 of those guys, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So you could send requests to each one of those folks if you really wanted to. Or if you apply for something, automatically you could request a report and ask why that was denied. But again, the link is on here. I'll try it real quick. I don't want to waste all night here. But if it pops right up, it seems to be smoking right along. And so you can see, it's got the .gov, it's a legit site, and then it directs you to annualcreditreport.com. So believe me, if you just type in free credit report, you're going to get shipped off to all these other sites, and they're going to be a little flashier and all that stuff. But they usually have a free credit report, but you better cancel the credit monitoring or whatever their angle is, because it's usually a paid service after that. You're fine with leaving their site. and then you go in here and obviously if there's identity theft taking place, somebody else could pull a credit report on you, but they're going to ask you some pretty detailed information. Anyway, now it's kind of bogging down. I'll pull one of those so you can take a look at it, but it's not that exciting. And these guys, the free ones, they will not give you the score. So if getting the score is super important to you, that site is not going to do it for you, because they can, by law, they don't have to give that information, so they don't. So Fair Credit Billing Act, you notify them within 60 days. They must respond within 30. So it gets kind of mechanical here, but you can see there's time limits. You know, if you wait till 2 billing cycles, 62 days or something like that, good luck. But anyway, they can't affect your credit rating while it's in dispute, which is good. This actually comes up, you know, this Fair Credit Reporting Bill. I've used this before. I mean, my daughter, for example, she locked her keys in her car, needed to take a taxi from like one side of Atlanta Airport to the other side. Jumped in this taxi, and this guy charged her like $55. And so she called me and told me she just got ripped off. I called the credit card company immediately. I said, you know, this is a scam. And they canceled it. So it also turns out this guy was using a different, it wasn't even a legitimate taxi. But anyway, you do have some protection. If she would have paid cash, it's gone. You know, if she would have paid debit, it would have been more difficult. But with a credit card, it was dead easy. So anyway, but that's, you know, a Fair Credit Billing Act. So it's, again, federal law. If you do happen to get your identity theft, this is, you know, there's different levels. There's somebody, you know, appropriating your number, and then there's somebody actually coming up with your documents and making fake passports and the rest of it. So there's all different levels. But again, you know, it's something you need to keep track of. But if you really realize you are a victim of true identity theft, I would call one of those credit reporting agencies and you know, report that you're a victim of identity theft and the rest of that, and get yourself shut down kind of globally. It's also what I used to do is really good practice was I'd kind of empty out my wallet before I go on a big trip and make a photocopy of all those different documents. Because if you lose your wallet and you need to cancel all your credit cards, well, the numbers are on the back of all those credit cards, and if you don't have that, you don't have the numbers. It's just going to make it more difficult. I mean, I was traveling in foreign countries. It's a little different in the States, but it's good to know what's in your wallet, so when you lose it, you have some ideas. File a police report. I had to do this for that one thing I had where they were ripping me off on a cable bill. Not a big deal. You go down to the police station, just right off over there in Elmore. I think it's $10, something like that. They sign a little statement, and there's your police report, and the fraud case can proceed.
The IRS did.
Kenny?
Last year, there was a whole rash of false filings for people's social security numbers, taking false deductions and getting refunds.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of money here and now.
There's always, you know, when I was working, like digging ditches, literally, and with these guys who were truly Mexicans, they were not, you know, they were just here for 3 months to work and were going back home. But anyway, one day I asked him, where do you get your social security number? And he just, you know, just pulled it right out of his head. And it's like a lottery. If it happens to be your social security number, you got problems at the end of the year, because, you know, if that social security number shows this income being generated, it looks like taxable wages to you. That's pretty darn easy for you to get fixed. And, you know, you just say, I can't be two places at once, you know. Now, if you're working at the same place and the guy steals your number, that can get more difficult. But when it happened to the person I knew, they just reported to the IRS, and IRS is happy because they withheld taxes on somebody who's never going to be able to file for a return, so they get to keep that money. So anyway, steps to take. Obviously, if you know, I don't expect everybody to write anything down. I mean, when it happens, you'll know it happened, and you'll take care of it then. Complaining consumer credit, ways to do it, but if you get to the point, you know, most of these people, nobody wants to make a federal case out of it. Nobody, and you don't want to deal with the bureaucracy and in the government. So if you can get it taken care of by the credit card company directly, they're usually more amenable to getting that done. Again, a number of different laws. They have different aspects to them, but there's some redundancy in there. And if you generally feel like you've been ripped off, there's probably a law that addresses it. But anyway, timeliness is the key. If you've got a problem and you catch it quickly, everybody's happy. But if you wait 60 days and then try to resolve it, everybody's more difficult. We won't make it through this whole thing. We're just going to continue through for a little bit. We're going to look at other sources of credit. Don't get overwhelmed. We'll get through this. So, yeah, again, some of the stuff falls into common sense. If you're looking at a loan, obviously, if you've got, a rich uncle, that's always good. If you've got assets in the bank and you can use something as collateral, a CD is collateral. I would be more, especially with the interest rates that we're paying right now, I would take that CD and pay for it in cash. It's not like I'm taking money out of the market that's going to be getting great interest rates at this point. Loans for education, yes, you may know about that. Keep in mind, though, that student loans and things like that, it depends what you're going to go into, especially if you're going to go into a field where there is some sort of deferment. The military sometimes has that. If you're maybe going to be a teacher in a certain area where there's a forgiveness for student loans, you'd be foolish not to take them. Check into those programs before you do that. What kind of loans should you seek? So median price, what they're talking about is just kind of day-to-day loans. You can go to a credit union and all those types of things and get what they call a signature loan. But it's better if you actually have an item that you're borrowing for. If you're borrowing because I want $10,000 in cash to spend on various things, the interest rate on that's going to be pretty high. If you're borrowing, $10,000 to buy a new snow machine, it's probably going to be a lower interest rate. Even though the resale value of a used snow machine isn't great, it's something. It's not just a signature loan. Expensive loans, so these are almost predatory sometimes, especially the financing, the check cashing companies, or even these guys who give you like a advance on your income tax return. Maybe it's a come on to get you in the door, but there's so many variables. Where they say this thing is, expensive loans, car and appliance dealers, sometimes not. Now, what I will tell you though, if they're saying a zero interest loan, there's probably some compensation in there. It's probably not, let's say the car is $30,000 if you get the zero interest loan, but if you're paying cash, it's $27,000. Well, the cost of that loan is not 0%. The cost of that loan is $3,000. So, in all things being equal, a lot of times it's, especially if you're buying a car, go to your credit union, go to your lender, find out what their rate is, and then when you go to the dealership, if you're buying a new car, see what their loan program is, or see what the price is if you're a cash buyer. Because if you get a loan from a credit union, even though you got a loan for it, you're presenting them cash. So if you get a significantly better price, there's so many variables. We'll spend some time talking about buying cars, but it's usually a painful process. But anyway, I wouldn't categorically say that all appliance dealers and car dealers have expensive loans, because, like I say, Lowe's or Home Depot will generally give you 2 years to pay for it with no interest, and they don't. The price is the same. So, bank and credit card cash advances, yeah, those are categorically expensive loans. Try not to do that at all, because that interest starts the day you do it. There is no flow period. So, truth in lending and then the finance charge. You need to read those statements at some point just to see kind of what's going on there. But the finance charges, the way they're calculated, the way that float is derived, is something you really want to pay attention to. What do I need to do? How quickly do I need to pay this balance down to zero to avoid having to pay finance charges? Because that's what you want to be. You want to be a convenience user of credit cards. you want to use them because it's quick and easy, and you're paying your balance every month. APR, annual percentage rate. So again, just for calculations. So it's you don't want some monthly rate. It's not even legal to quote rates in that way. You need to have it in a uniform manner, and that's why they go with an APR. Term versus an interest cost. So yeah, it depends. They're making a calculation when they loan you money, and the longer they have to make that loan for, the more risk they're taking. Theoretically, the economy can change or not. But so if you get, say, especially like on a house, if you get a 15-year loan, the interest rate is typically going to be lower than a 30-year loan. It's going to be a bit higher because they've got 15 more years of risk to endure. Variable interest rates, big gamble. People were fans of that, and a lot of them got clobbered. I've done it before. I had an interest rate that was as low as 1-point-something% on a home when I was in Spain, but I don't think I would endure that risk again. It worked out great, but I got out at the right time. But if you do have collateral to secure the loan, and this is where I'm saying, if you go to the bank and you say, I want to borrow $10,000 and here's my signature, you're not offering any collateral. You're going to be paying a higher interest rate. If it's associated with a car, a product, something they can repossess, they're going to be happier. And especially if it's a house, that's why houses have interest rates down around 3%. Large down payment up front, you show some credit worthiness. You show that you're able to do that. And then have a show the long term, which we already talked about. Simple interest, so we know how to do this. Principal, rate, and time. So, if you want to, I'm going to give you a $100. I want 5% at the end of the year. You've got all three of those. You owe me $105 at the end of the year. But simple interest it's simple. It's just not used that often. We typically will use a compound interest where every day that interest is accruing and that amount is accruing, and at the end of the year I get $106, or something like that. It's going to be a little bit more because from after that first day I've got more than $100, and then I've got a little bit more. Anyway, over the short run doesn't make a big difference. Over the long run, that's how those charts work. You end up with $5.3 million. Simple interest on a declining balance, so interest paid only on the amount of the original principal not yet repaid. So there's different ways that you calculate this in terms of credit, and you just need to kind of read the fine print. Add-on interest, so added to the principal, divided by the payments. Anyway, we don't really have time to go through each example, but you need to know when you're taking a loan how they're calculating the rate. Adjusted balance method. This is pretty much the most common method for credit cards, and hopefully finance charges are calculated after payments are made and the billing period have been subtracted. You got a $5,000 charge on your credit card, you pay $5,000 on that credit card. Even though you had $5,000 on that credit card, if you use this method, you have zero balance, therefore zero interest to be paid. And that's where you want to be. Average daily balance, and this is not typically the way it's done. This way you are going to be paying something, Well, throughout the course of the period you had, let's say you had 5,000 at the start, zero at the end, so you had average daily of 2,500. That's not as advantageous to you. Previous balance method. Yep, do not want that one. Like I say, you've seen, do you deal with this at all? Not so much. It's typically the adjusted balance method is the one. So this is part of the reason why, borrowers are more concerned about longer term loans. If I loan you $300,000 today and you got to pay me $300,000 30 years from now, that $300,000 30 years from now is not as much money. It's the same dollar value, but what can you do with it? Not a whole lot. So this when you're buying a home, they have to present you all these papers, and they'll say over the course of this loan you'll pay whatever $500,000. You're like, oh God, it's only a $300,000. But don't panic. Using the time value of money, it's not as bad as it looks. But because of truth in lending and the rest of it, they have to show you those papers, and it almost does more damage because now it confuses you. Taxes paid on consumer credit is not tax deductible. So the key there is consumer credit. On real estate, it is tax deductible. So the credit card companies, they didn't do a very good job lobbying on that one. They lost a lot. Minimum payment, yep. Well, they're talking about avoid the minimum payment. If you owe $5,000 on your credit card, you'll have like a minimum payment of like $130, and you can keep making that minimum payment, but that's not a good situation. You're not doing anything. You're not paying down the principal in any large amount. Rule of 78, we don't use that anymore. And then credit insurance. Credit insurance is kind of unique. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, you know what, included with your home mortgage is credit life insurance. And this is a great deal for you, because what we're going to do in the case of your death, your loan mortgage will be paid off and your mortgage amount will be paid off. And this is, why are they doing that? Because they don't want to deal with grieving spouses and the rest of that. And, if you own or have a loan from a bank, and you pass away, that loan in most cases, if you have the credit insurance, will be paid off, and you often see that with credit cards as well. The likelihood of you dying is quite small, and the ease of having that whole process settled for the credit card company or the mortgage company is well worth it to them. And that insurance fee is factored into what you're paying on your bill anyway. So, but anyway, they preach it as a huge benefit for you, which it is. I mean, granted, you don't have that mortgage anymore, but they don't have to deal with, trying to go to probate court and wrestle things away and get things done. Cost of credit. So, some standard things there. Some of those rates, when they say 0%. It has to truly be 0% for 6 days. They got to mail the statements 21 days before they're due. Things like that. All these are on your best interest. So most of those issues have been resolved in your favor. More on that. Yeah. Giving credit cards to people under 21 without a cosigner means they repay the debt. I mean, you need to, it keeps the credit card companies from engaging in practices that are a bit unethical. So this was what I captured just yesterday. So it's from an FTC website, so it's legit. These are for stolen ATM or debit cards. So, but you can notice that there are limits on there. Within 2 days after you learn about the loss or theft, you're liable for $50. More than 2 days, out to 60, you're liable for $500. More than 60 days, possibly more. That's not a strong position. So that's what the ATM debit card things are now. With credit cards, it's a bit different. It's more favorable for you, but at least they've got some protection now for debit cards. That didn't used to be the case. As far as managing your debts, it does not pay to keep a secret here. Like I say, everybody's kind of in the same boat. The people who issued the cards, they want to get paid, and they don't want to put this thing in a collection. They basically want to get their money. So to call these people, they're not necessarily the enemy at this point, and they do have some people that it sounds counterintuitive to call the credit card company for help, but they actually do have some folks who who work for them who do credit counseling. If you do start getting hounded by debt collectors, if it's still a point of hounding, they probably are breaking the rules. You can look and see what's legitimate, but a lot of times the collection agencies are pretty aggressive. I mean, the way cell phone numbers change around all the time, I get a bunch of stray calls from people who used to have the same phone number that have bad credit, and they're usually robocalls, and anyway, the collectors are out there. Reasons for debt, I'm not necessarily going to go into it, but yeah, people do all sorts of bad choices that lead to problems. You know, some of these are whatever, more emotional, voluntary things, but there's also things like, you know, if I've got a sick child, you know, I'll put it on the card and deal with the consequences later. So there's reasons for this. How do you get more problems? Yeah, if you can only pay the minimum balance. Basically, if you're financing, you know, day-to-day expenses with credit, that's not a good sign. Drawing out of your savings for basic necessities. Anyway, there's lots of stuff that can go on, but again, it's individual, kind of big boy approach. Yeah, the rest of them. Being denied cards, putting off medical or dental visits. Putting off, yeah, that is getting pretty serious. That's probably not a good strategy. So, private and government sources that can assist consumers. It depends where you live, but a lot of times the credit people. Have you ever dealt with the credit people from some of these consumer credit counseling things that are actually part of the credit card company? Yeah, and they're pretty straightforward. Yeah, exactly. So it's, you know, they're going to be probably a little bit more responsive, and so credit card counseling system supported by the contributions from the banks, merchants. Again, they want to see their money, and you know, there's smart ways to get it back, and there's bad ways. None of these things are involving, you know, them selling off their debt for a fraction of what's owed. You know, that thing where they're owed $5,000 and they got to sell it to a collector guy for $500. Hopefully this will avoid this scenario. So, you know, they'll give you some counseling perhaps, but the big thing is that debt consolidation plan. That's where you got like 3 or 4 credit cards. You're paying 14% interest on all of them. That's just stupid. Let's just cancel those cards, you know, and we're going to put them into one fixed loan with a lower interest rate. You're going to have monthly payments, and 18 months from now, you'll have your debts paid off, and you won't have paid that 14% needlessly. You're not racking up all those extra charges. And anyway, they're there to, you know, help you out in that regard. Sometimes universities do it, but again, there's different options. But the big deal is the bankruptcy is just that's not a good. That's a rather drastic solution to what is hopefully a temporary problem. If you declare bankruptcy, you have made it a big problem that's going to haunt you. So what you're doing, I mean, it's a legal process which some of all your assets are distributed amongst creditors. So anyway, you're basically going to be involved in the courts, and you know, you're going to them and say, yeah, I'm not good with my money. You need to take charge of it for me. You know, which sounds like, oh man, I escape all my debts. But guess what? They now get to tell you what to do, and they get to tell you what you can keep and what's not. You may think your big TV or your whatever car is, well, no, you can't say, oh no, that's part of the deal. You give them a list of what you got, and you know. Anyway, has anybody been involved in bankruptcy? No, I don't mean that in a personal sense. I just mean seeing the process. Anyway, I don't know what they mean by that first stat. I think the more compelling thing would be 64% are men. But anyway, but too many people declared bankruptcy. And so they actually did, you know, go figure. 2 million in 2005, and sure enough, there's a new law in 2005 where it's just out of control. People are declaring bankruptcy as a means of getting around paying debts. And the other thing is you don't get around all the debts. If you owe the money to the government,
That doesn't go away.
They're not discharging. That's what they call it, discharging the debts. They're not doing it. Or if you got a good job and you say, you know what, I'm not going to pay these bills anymore, I'm bankrupt. No. They'll say, you can work. We've got the wage earner plan for you, a different variant of bankruptcy, and you'll pay off these debts. So Chapter 7 is the one where this is general bankruptcy. Most of your debts are going to be erased. But in exchange for that, you give them that list, you pay a filing fee, many debts are forgiven, but assets are sold to pay creditors. So all that cool stuff, you know, it's essentially they get to decide what you keep. Some stuff is, you know, if you, out of necessity, need a car and clothes to get back and forth to work, you know, they're probably going to do that. But any luxury items, if you've got a boat, airplane, those are history. Anyway, a fresh start. But it's not so fresh because your credit rating is severely jacked up. So things that you can escape, yeah, those bank charges, unsecured loans, unpaid hospital and physician bills. So, and the fact that people go into bankruptcy actually makes a lot of these bills higher because they know there's going to be a certain default rate. May still owe. So, like I said, in most cases, you know, money owed to the government is probably going to be not discharged. Child support and alimony, if that was excluded, everybody would do it, but, you know, so those are exceptions. Loans, which are typically to the government, and if you do something, you know, intentionally, I'll never have to pay it, I'm going to declare bankruptcy. That would be willful and malicious. So anyway, 2005, they made a few changes. None of these are really that exciting for you, but this Chapter 13 is the one where I'm saying, and it's, you know, pseudo-voluntary, whatever. The court is going to give you some options here, and this is where you're going to do this sort of wage earner plan. So if you've got an income, if your debts aren't completely out of control, you make your payments, everybody kind of gets their money, and things go better for you. So that's Chapter 13. So Chapter 7 is the general bankruptcy. Chapter 13 is they don't really have a title for it here, but typically it's known as the wage earner plan. So anyway, those were the items. We really don't have time to do justice to going back through the end of course project. I'll probably do this next week, and we'll go back through and we'll talk about what should be going on that report. But you know, like I say, this isn't a bad time to go out there and kind of look for resources. Maybe go to things like bankrate.com or other things and look at some of these calculators, you know, retirement calculators, and come up with kind of your numbers and try and figure out what your chosen career field is going to pay you. First, have to decide if that's acceptable. You know, it's not too late to change majors or do something. There's a whole lot of people there are some new stats that came out about people being involved in STEM and science, technology, engineering, and math, and just the, you know, job prospects that are. Anyway, the unemployment rate again for somebody with a degree in a technical major is going to be your prospects are quite good. And what they were also saying in this case was they were so good that it really didn't even matter what university you went to. The incomes. So whether you go to Princeton or UAA or anything in between, you know, lower or higher, you're in pretty good shape for a certain major. So look at that. I'm not saying to, you know, if you want to be, I don't know, perhaps a school teacher or a social worker, you know, realize that you're doing it for other things than purely pursuit of money, because it may not be as profitable as what you're looking for. Anyway, this thing finally loaded up. It took us to the security thing. You can see that it's brought to you by all three guys. They aren't cooperating willingly, I guarantee you. They're forced to by the government, but you can get those credit reports, and you know, you just go through the thing and start stepping through the things. They're not going to take your credit card number. You're not going to be charged. You'll get a credit report, and it will, like I say, it will not have that credit score on it, but it will show you open accounts, and it'll show any negative information on you. So it's good to look at that, especially if you get denied credit. You want to know what happened and get that fixed. Because you may be in a case where you really do need credit. It may just be for a snow machine now, but it could be a doctor or something later on. So you need to make sure that stuff is squared away, and identity theft is, could potentially, well, at least you can mitigate it by eliminating unused accounts. All right. So I will see you next week. Good luck.